Welcome to Tales from the Fandom, a podcast that brings a special guest out of the multiverse and straight to you. And now your host, David Ginsburg.
Hey everybody, welcome to a special episode of Tales from the Fandom. This is David here. Before you get into the meat of the episode, just wanting to say thank you. Thank you for listening for the past 2 years. If you're a relatively new listener, welcome to the podcast. And if you're someone that's been around since episode 1, thanks for sticking around for over 150 episodes. I've done everything from just the straight interviews that normally get released on Monday to movie reviews, TV show reviews, previews, Kickstarter reviews, and just everything in between. And I am so happy to have started this and have been able to talk with so many different people, not only in the United States, but Canada, Australia, the Netherlands, and so many more. And the amount of friendships that have come from this podcast is really what makes it all worthwhile, whether it's the editing or the recording time or just promoting stuff on Twitter and Facebook. It is well worth it in the end for the friendships that I've made. And I just want to say thank you deep down to everybody who has listened, who has checked out this podcast, who has recommended it to friends. I cannot thank you enough. So I just have to say simply thank you. Enjoy this episode. It's a special one. I'm really happy with it. And I hope that you enjoy it too. And I will be seeing you on the other side of Women in Tabletop Gaming Month as we resume our normal episodes in July. So thank you so much. And welcome to a special episode of Tales from the Fandom. It is the month of June, and while we are doing the Women in Tabletop Gaming Month, it also happens to be the anniversary of Tales from the Fandom. 2 years ago, I started this podcast with no real idea of what was necessary to actually do a podcast. I wanted to just start something for myself. And here we are 2 years later and way over 150 episodes later. And I am joined today by one of my favorite and special guests, Barbie. You might know her formerly as Asgard Barbie, but she is Barbie Wi. And I am so happy to have you back for this episode, Barbie.
I am so happy to be back. I love this podcast.
I am so happy. Now, for those of you who might not know who Barbie is, you can go back and listen all the way back to episode 9, released back on July 25th of 2016. And Barbie was one of my first guests and interviews in the long line of interviews that I've had. And then you came back to talk about Buffy's 20th anniversary, which, as we speak, is the number 2 most downloaded episode for Tales from the Fandom.
I love thinking about that episode. I get so nostalgic even now. That was such a great show. Gosh.
I always love, seeing the movement of episodes. And it's one of those episodes where I'm like, I'm so glad that number one, that I did that episode and that we did it together, and that it's, number 2 as opposed to maybe number 100 or 150 or whatever.
Right. It obviously resonated with people. Buffy had such a long reach, and that's so cool.
It did. Now, normally I do the asking of questions, and we talk and banter and what people have come to expect from this episode. But this time I am handing Tales from the Fandom over to you.
I am almost drunk with power. I haven't done this in a really long time. I used to write for the newspaper in high school. I guess that counts, but I haven't done it since. So I guess I'll put my reporter hat on and get started. I just wanted to start with, what fandoms are you into? Because you seem to know a little bit about everything, and it impresses me, honestly. Like your anime, you touch on Marvel, DC, you touch on everything. It's such a cool scope.
I was thinking about that because you sent me a list of questions. I have to say that, normally I send the list of questions. Barbie sent over her list of questions, and I was thinking about it. And there's people that are called like the jack of all trades. Well, I think of myself kind of like the jack of all fandoms. I dip myself into a little bit of everything. And I really think part of it was because I worked for Blockbuster way back. People that don't know what Blockbuster is, it was a store where you could rent like videotapes back when videotapes were around, and DVDs and video games. And one of the perks, besides like the low pay, was I got to get 7 free rentals every week.
Oh my gosh.
Of movies or whatever was available. So video games, movies. So I think by the time I left Blockbuster, and I tried to figure it out at one point, I worked there for 5 or 6 years, and you multiply that by like 7 movies a week. It got to the point where I had seen so many that when people would say like, oh, what movie do you want to go see? I'd just be like, oh, just pick, because I should probably have hit everything in the late 90s or early 2000s by that point.
That's roughly 1,800 rentals if you rented a movie every day for 5 years.
Right. And on top of that, I'm obviously going to go see the movies that are coming out in the movie theater at the same time.
Oh my gosh.
So that, and is also during like my single, college age time where I'm single and I have expendable income and nothing to spend it on but going to go see movies and watch movies and have that time. So, I'm into the major ones like Star Trek and Star Wars, Game of Thrones, Harry Potter, Joss Whedon's everything. Marvel Comics is the comics that I gear myself towards. Tabletop role playing. My friends got me into anime because that's what happens when I'm in hanging out with those particular types of people, like the nerds of high school and college. Anime is always a thing that happens in college. So
I have 2 sisters I have 4 sisters, but 2 of them are really, really into anime. So I grew up with like Bleach and all sorts of things on the TV, and I just never got into it.
Yeah, I think for me, I had people that, they knew my tastes of what I liked, and they'd say, okay, let's sit down and watch an episode or 2. And if I liked it, they would, keep it up. But a lot of the anime also that I originally got into was a limited run series where it's like, okay, you have 13 episodes and it's over. Thank you.
Huh.
But so that's why I'm into so many fandoms, is that just I was exposed early on, and between reading and movie watching and TV shows, that's all I really did for a long time.
That's incredible. I mean, the sheer number is just, that would explain it. Do you happen, if you had to nail one down, what would you say was your favorite, or your top 3 or top 5 or whatever? Yeah, I expected that.
That used to be the problem when people would be like, oh, what's your top 5 favorite movies? Well, I've seen like 1,500 of them. Give me like a subgenre or something. There's the nostalgia ones. There's, Star Trek and Star Wars are always going to be nostalgia reasons. Buffy's always going to be nostalgia. Boy Meets World is so very much nostalgia. Like I grew up. Yeah, I grew up in almost not with like the same year, because we were like a year or 2 off in how they skipped a couple grades. But it was definitely like the thing where, like, at the same time that Corey's growing up, like I'm in that same boat, give or take, and it's like, oh my gosh, my heart. Yeah. So it's hard to narrow down. Like I love Harry Potter. My kids are reading it now, and I love that one of them now, Willow, she's now on Goblet of Fire as we record this, and she pointed out when we were watching Chamber of Secrets, I think, or Prisoner of Azkaban, that it was nothing like the books that she read. And I said, yes, I know. I love you for this.
She's learned early to deal with disappointment. I mean, Prisoner of Azkaban is probably my favorite movie, but that was the Alfonso Cuarón direction.
Yep.
And I really loved like the cinematography of it. But yeah, those movies as a whole, I do think they get better. But the first ones are real disappointing.
Mm-hmm.
That's okay. I should rewatch those too and see how they've aged. I was also looking at doing Lord of the Rings here in a little bit and just kind of seeing where they've gone. I haven't done that in a while. So fandom started really, really early for you. Could you maybe pinpoint your very first fandom? Like your gateway drug?
I can pinpoint two of them, and they both happened right around the same time. The first one was, I remember we had moved to Florida from Canada, and for Christmas one year, my uncle and aunt had actually sent a present, which never happens. Like our families like that are not close. We don't see each other. And I remember opening the box, and it was the box set of the Lord of the Rings trilogy and The Hobbit. This was back in, oh gosh, like 91 or 92. And I devoured those books. Now, granted, at the time, I think I was probably about 11-ish, maybe 12, that like I had nightmares from the ring wraiths. Like I would read that and I would be like, oh my gosh, ring wraiths are going to come get me and everything. But
Did you ever see the Rankin Bass version of The Hobbit, the
yeah,
stop motion?
yes,
That gave me nightmares. I mean, I still won't watch it, so I totally get it.
that the only part that gave me nightmares on like that was like the spider stuff.
Oh, Shalob, yeah, I can see that.
So yeah, the whole Mirkwood Forest, spiders like wrapping them all up and everything. But yeah, I loved that Hobbit, and I think I might have even seen the Rankin Bass movie before I'd ever read the actual books.
I definitely did. That was super early for me.
And then the other, like, so on the flip side of like having that fantasy was at the same time a friend of mine in middle school was really into Star Trek, The Next Generation. I'd never
Oh
seen
yeah.
Star Trek, and I was like, I have no clue what this Star Trek is. And we had watched like a few Next Generation episodes, but it didn't click with me until we saw Star Trek Six: Undiscovered Country in the movie theater, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing! Like that's an awesome Star Trek. And from there, it just devolved into, Star Trek fan club and wearing the uniform and Star Trek conventions. And that was that for like several years.
That's such that's so incredible that you got it from a friend, because everybody that I talk to is like, "Oh yeah, my dad, I grew up with it. My dad always had it on the TV." And everybody got it from their dad, it seems. So that's cool that you had nerdy friends way back then. You are DS9, right? That's your favorite Star Trek?
Yes, I do love my Deep Space Nine. I know that for some people it's, Next Generation, for some people it's Voyager. And through the podcast, I'm proud to say that I've met other people that love Deep Space Nine as much as I do. But yeah, Deep Space Nine is the one where I'm like, heck yeah, I will watch this again. It's also the one that I never see like replayed on like the Space Channel or Sci-Fi or whatever's being like wherever Star Trek is now. It's always Next Generation, Voyager, or the original series, but I never see any I never see Deep Space Nine.
Yeah. We call him Captain Sasko, by the way, because he's so sassy. I would say Deep Space Nine is probably my second favorite because, Beverly Crusher owns my heart. Oh my gosh. But I loved Deep Space Nine. I wasn't big on Voyager. That surprises me that there are some big Voyager fans out there.
I wasn't either when it originally came out, but when I think I might have watched it all on Netflix at some point, and that's when I really got like a better appreciation of it. But I think with Voyager, the problem was also that it bounced around a lot when it was airing, as like where we lived, it'd be on at midnight one week, and then it'd be on like at 2 o'clock in the morning the other, because we didn't have, I think it was UPN was the channel at that time. And we didn't have a UPN channel, so it was airing just randomly whenever, and it never aired in order. We could never find it. And back in those days of VCRs, sometimes it just didn't record.
Yeah, I had that problem with Buffy like 1,000,006 times. I remember it must have been like a thunderstorm or something, and I missed the snowstorm episode, Amends, where Angel goes and he says he's going to stay out until the daylight because he's just done with it.
Mm-hmm.
I missed that episode for years because it would not like replay on syndication. It was rough, man, back when TV was just TV. Netflix is really the savior of fandom, I think.
Absolutely. And it's one of those things, you say that you missed Amends. And I remember in college it must have been season 7. I moved to a place that had no cable, and we weren't going to get cable while season 7 was finishing up.
Oh,
And
no.
I had to order videotapes every week from somebody online of the latest Buffy episodes to get me through it.
That is dedication. Like, I wouldn't have even thought of that. That's brilliant.
Yeah, I think I was probably paying like $10 a tape, but I'd wait for 2 weeks. So I'd be like, well, record 2 episodes and then send me the tape and I'll pay you $10.
That's so cool. I guess eBay existed at that point in time. That would have been a great little business to have. Okay. Favorite characters. I know there are going to be some Buffy characters, which is why I want to segue into that now.
Okie doke. Well, we'll start off sticking with Buffy. And we probably talked about it on the Buffy episode, but I love Xander, regardless of how flawed he is now as a character. Looking back, you're definitely like, Xander, you're not really as great as you were back when I was watching you on TV. But I still resonate with Xander. He's definitely the everyman. He's not the one with the Slayer powers. He's not a witch. He's not a werewolf. He's just, and I think, he references it during season 7. He's like, I'm the guy who sees everybody, and I'm the guy who watches. And with how he's progressed in the comic books, as far as being one of the Watchers and leading the whole Slayer thing that kind of exploded. I loved his character. I loved his relationships with the other characters. I named my first son after Xander, even though my wife will say that it was not because of Buffy the Vampire Slayer at all. It's totally where his name came from. And just as a side note for people that are listening, I also have a daughter. Her name is Willow because, again, not because Buffy the Vampire Slayer at all from one side, but totally Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
That's awesome.
Neville Longbottom from Harry Potter. I fell in love with Neville from book 1. Again, his character in the books has such an evolution from where he starts off with to the end of the series.
Yeah, he really got his day in the end.
Absolutely. And it's interesting with how J.K. Rowling wrote it, as far as, it could have been either Harry Potter or Neville Longbottom that the prophecy, was mentioning, and with how Voldemort heard about it and chose Harry, making him his equal, it left Neville the pureblood out of it. But it's Neville is on that same path, of dealing with a lot of the same issues that Harry has. Harry doesn't have his parents, they're killed, but Neville's parents were driven crazy. So yeah, I love Neville. Samwell Tarly from Game of Thrones, Samwise Gamgee from Lord of the Rings are the two Sams. If you can kind of see the trend of characters I'm going with,
you're
it's
big
not
on sidekicks.
Yeah, it's not the main character. It's always the side characters, the background characters, and I'll throw in a Deep Space Nine character, Chief O'Brien.
See, when I think of Chief O'Brien, I think TNG, because he was there for so long, and Keiko kept disappearing to work on posts away from the ship and everything. That's so funny.
Yeah, I was super happy when they brought his character from Next Generation over, because you've seen him on Next Generation, whether it's the transporter room to where the evolution of his character to the evolution of him marrying Keiko and them having a daughter, and Worf helping give birth to that daughter essentially. And then they're transferred to Deep Space Nine and you deal with that relationship, and that type of storytelling from that initial moment to the end of Deep Space Nine. I loved Chief O'Brien.
He's pretty great. My husband actually wears Chief O'Brien's rank when we dress up, because we both have a TNG uniform. I'm looking at doing Deep Space Nine down the road a bit, probably next year. It looks like I really want to wear Jadzia's spots, so that's gonna happen eventually.
Oh my goodness, I can't imagine, as far as like talking cosplay for a moment, like I cannot imagine the people that do like the body paint because I don't want any like if something gets on my hands from like just food or whatever or paint from painting or the kids' projects, like I have to go wash. Like no, don't put anything on my body at all.
It's fine for me as long as it's not sticky. And once you powder it, I can't really tell that there's paint there. If it's a prosthetic, there's no way. There's just absolutely not. You might have seen where I did my Madame Vastra and Jenny cosplay.
Hmm.
And bless her, my best friend did Madame Vastra because I was not putting those prosthetics anywhere near my head. I said, I'll be your Jenny. And she said, okay. You don't cosplay, do you? That was one of my questions.
No, I don't. Obviously, like I mentioned, when I was in high school, I did for the Star Trek fan club whenever we would help out at conventions because you have to like for people that I'm nearing 40 at this point. I turned 39 this year, 40 is the next year. Back in when I was growing up, especially high school time, so like 93 to 97, the only conventions that we had come into town were Star Trek conventions. And it wouldn't be like, oh, check out like all the 20 different people coming. It is like one person for the Star Trek convention and it is a 1 day convention. So being part of like the local fan club, we would dress up, we would work the convention for free, basically providing like not security, but like in line management or at helping with questions or running helping the panels get set up, and then we would get to meet like the actor actress afterwards.
So cool.
So the like that was the only time I ever wore like my Star Trek uniform was for those conventions, and it was only I think two or maybe three conventions that I ever attended. I still have the uniform packed away somewhere with like the old school tricorder and the phaser from Next Generation. Even though I wore the Deep Space Nine costume, I carried around the Next Generation stuff because that's what they produced back in the mid
Right.
90s. So yeah, that was my only attempt. I did like I guess you'd call it like a closet cosplay last year of Han Solo because we all went as a family to MegaCon for a day. So my wife dressed up as Leia and the kids dressed up as different characters. So I did like a very basic like Han Solo costume, but it was nothing crazy.
I have to tell you, if I had kids, they would absolutely each be in an Ewok costume every time we went to a convention. How cute would that be? I might even do it with my dogs. Believe you me, I am not kidding. Are there any fandoms, speaking of kids, that your kids have gotten you into?
All right. Well, I'll start off with the one that's probably the biggest one, and I've only talked to maybe one person about it, but I remember when Netflix had My Little Pony come on, and I actually sat down with Willow at one point, and I was like, "Oh, let's just check out My Little Pony." And at the time, she was not interested in it. I think she's too young for it. And I was like, "This is not the My Little Pony from the '80s that I remember. I have no clue who these characters are, and I don't care." So I shut it off. Now a year or so passes and we start letting them watch their own stuff on Netflix as long as it's kid related they have to get our approval. And they started or Willow started watching My Little Pony, and I was like, okay, and I would sit with her and watch it for a little bit. And as I started watching it, I started getting invested in the characters and the story. And, there's always the jokes about like bronies, like the guys that are into My Little Pony. And I have to say, the stories are well written. The characters are well written. There's actual character development over the number of seasons that they've had so far. You've had big name guests come on and do voices. Like one of the big ones that I was like, I recognized the voice before I even saw the show was Weird Al Yankovic did a pony character. And I think that's probably the biggest one that I've gotten into to where like I have my favorite My Little Pony character.
So do I.
I have like, the characters that I'm interested in, and the character that I as far as like main characters go, like I tend again not to go to the main characters, but I love Big Mac. Like Big Mac is my favorite.
That's an interest. I would never think that anybody would pick him out because he only shows up, every couple of episodes. I was definitely thinking Spike, but I think Rarity is my favorite pony.
You definitely yes.
If that's not so transparent.
I could see that. And then I guess another fandom that the kids got me into was Amazon has their own TV shows that they do, and one of them is a very cute, like geared towards middle school kids, and it's called Just Add Magic, and it's about these three girls who discover this magic cookbook, and you cook the recipe, and it's supposed to do something magical for you, whether it's like, oh, you can hear people's thoughts or whatever, but there's always like a trade-off, like, well, if you're going to do this spell, you are sacrificing or giving up something to do it for a period of time. And the kids really got into that. And I'm not just like Willow, but the whole family. We have watched all 3 seasons. They left it on a cliffhanger, so hopefully they'll come back. But it's a really good show.
I've never heard of it, but we do have Prime, so I might. I watch all sorts of things. My problem is that I get nightmares really easily, so I can't watch things like Jessica Jones or, my regular fandoms at night. I have to watch something that's not going to destroy my sleep. So that's where My Little Pony came in. I'm in season 5 or 6 right now. I watch that at night, so I might have to look at Amazon. Personally, I was hit big by the Trolls truck this year. I did not understand because they have all these big names. Like every
Justin
character
Timberlake
is a huge name. Yeah. Writing songs for the movies, and it's just like it's huge, and I didn't get it until we watched it.
When we had kids, my wife and I made an arrangement, like it was going to be a trade-off on the stupid kids movies, essentially, because we knew the kids would ask for going to see the most ridiculous movies. And I got Trolls, and I will say, like, I like the music, but I wasn't much into the movie. I've seen it a few more times, but I'm glad that I didn't have, say, like Boss Baby or a few of the other ones that my wife has had to take the kids to.
I will say that the Netflix Trolls, they have like a little cartoon series that they produced on there, is even better than the movie. I think they have snuck in a few jokes for the adults watching, and it's funny. I will say that she's on my cosplay slate for next year. I've already ordered the wigs. I'm so excited. That's a lot of body paint. Oh, I'm not looking forward to that. But
that is, yeah.
The pictures will be good. So excited. Speaking of fandoms, I figured you would be probably the best person to ask about lesser known fandoms and recommending them to people because I do tend to like what's popular, what's on the surface, what are people talking about, and then I'll check them out for myself. And sometimes I like them and sometimes I don't. But finding those like the fandoms that don't get a lot of airplay or a lot of, word of mouth, that's really hard sometimes.
It is, and that's one of the things I like to do with the podcast is not only like hit the major ones that everyone knows, but finding those like standouts where it's like, oh man, I remember that. Let's talk about this, or trying to just get educated about things that maybe I'm not as familiar with. I was going to lead off with one. I think I'll start with the oldest one, going back probably is either the late 90s or early 2000s. I think it's early 2000s. And it was Malcolm Jamal Warner from The Cosby Show. And I think it's Luke Perry. And okay, yes. It was Malcolm Jamal Warner from The Cosby Show and Luke Perry. And the TV show was called Jeremiah. And it ran for 2 seasons. And it was a post-apocalyptic TV series that was on Showtime. And basically the premise was the adult population was wiped out, and you're picking up with a whole new civilization where the kids, and I think it's like over a certain age, and I don't remember what the age cutoff was, but like you have these kids growing up in like trying to manage food and trying to figure out like how power works, and you have no clue like how they're actually surviving, and it's a really great one, like a great story. And these two characters hook up as adults, because once you grow up and you're now an adult, but they've grown up in this world where like their parents died basically in front of them, and now they're adults, and now you have kids that are growing up alongside like them in the world. And it's got a really good twist at the end of season 1. And season 2, I've only watched a bit of it, but I think I've heard that it left off at a cliffhanger. It's really hard to find though, but it's so good. It's such a good show for what it was way back in like the early 2000s.
I'll have to look. That's the problem with some of the lesser knowns. Like if Netflix or Hulu or Amazon isn't going to carry them, it's kind of like, were they on DVD? Can I track those down or something like that? It gets a little hard.
Exactly. So that one is one. Leverage, which is one that ended not too long ago, but it ran again late 2000s and is on TNT. And Leverage is a group of 5 characters, and one of the actors was Christian Kane from Angel.
Oh.
And he's on there, and Aldous Hodge, who you may have seen in other movies or TV shows, is also on there. And it's a group of 5 characters. You have the hacker, you have the hitter, you have basically like someone who can pickpocket or get into places through harnesses and wires and everything. You have the face woman who basically like she can change her characters and accents and everything. Then you have like the main guy, and it's a group of 5 people who were brought together to kind of like steal these secrets, like these company secrets. And then at the end they realize like they work together really well, and even though they were on like the wrong side of the law for their lives, now they're working on doing the right thing. Like they always say like we provide that leverage of, oh, if something bad has happened to you and you need to like the person got fired from their job and what they've designed has been stolen, like they'll go in and steal the designs back or get the money that's owed back. And it's such a good show. That ran for 5 seasons, and I think with that show, like they knew at the end that they were going to be done with it, so they got to end it on their terms, which is wonderful.
That's really nice and really rare.
Oh yeah, and it's such a fun show, especially because the characters all form like this family. Like the 2 older characters take care of like the 3 younger type characters, and those 3 characters act like brother sister kind of. And it's so well done. And I think everyone, if they checked out Leverage, and I'm totally not selling it as I should, but it's such a great show. And I think if people gave it like a few episodes, they'd get into it.
Is it on a streaming platform? Do you know?
Oh my goodness. I don't know. I think it was on Netflix at some point. I don't know if it's still there for, switch to Hulu or whatever else. I'll have to take a look, and I'll update the show notes for where people can maybe find these things. And then I guess the last one I want to talk about is The Newsroom, which was on HBO, and that was all about this cable news network, and how they produced shows and the ethics and morals related to like talking about like politics and reporting on stories and getting it out there. And I think The Newsroom is most famous for like the clip that goes around now that you'll find about the main character talking about why America isn't great anymore. And that's like, for a long time you'd always see that clip, and it's like, dang, like if only people would watch all of The Newsroom and they would totally understand where he's coming from, instead of using that clip of, well, see, look at these people talking about how terrible America is, and America's, because it comes off as being something that could be construed as real because of how it was shot. And it's another really well done show. And I think that one was done by Aaron Sorkin. So his TV shows are always really well done.
Yeah, I'm actually really surprised I haven't heard of it. I haven't heard of any of them, so it gives me some homework. Netflix is running dry a little bit lately, so I've binged a lot of things. So I find myself looking for like new footholds, new fandoms. What can I watch?
That's always the problem is I'm like, well, do I watch this show that I haven't seen before, or do I watch the show that I've enjoyed and maybe I'll just rewatch it again?
We're currently rewatching Psych, and it was honestly a great decision. We haven't watched it since it first aired, and I'd forgotten how good it was.
Oh man, the last thing I binged, I obviously binged like Jessica Jones season 2.
Oh, we haven't started that yet. I'm so excited for it.
Oh, I think it's really divisive. I've seen some of my friends post about how they didn't like it, but I really loved it, and I thought it really built on the first season and then her role from like the Defenders. But yeah, I liked it. So that's a good one. And then we binged. We just like my wife and I, Michelle. We binged Parks and Rec, which was a wonderful decision.
I love Parks and Rec. Like, we also binged it. That was another one that we got into like way late. We got into it like right after it ended. And so luckily all the episodes were on Netflix. And we said, okay, there's a lot of these. Let's give it a try. Oh my God, my heart. I did not expect to love it so much. Chris Traeger is literally my favorite person. I didn't even think of that as being a fandom, because it's like, I guess like the younger kids aren't into things like that, so I kind of discount it as being fandom worthy, but I definitely get excited about it. I've definitely thought about cosplaying Leslie Knope because A, it would be so comfortable, and B, I would get waffles.
There you go. Waffles and whipped cream.
Yeah, right. So maybe that'll happen. We should rewatch that at some point. Man, there are some really good ones out there. I also really love like being an older geek. I'll say older, I guess. Getting to see fandoms develop. I know you mentioned Boy Meets World, and I watched that originally when it aired, and then got to see Girl Meets World, and I really loved that. And I hate that it didn't get to end on their terms. The ending was really hard for me. I really wanted to see more.
Oh, me too. That was one of the things where I remember when they announced Girl Meets World, and I was so excited. You know, they had the original cast coming back,
I
and they were
can't believe
going to.
how many of them they got. Oh my
I
gosh.
know, and not only that, like that it was going to be from a girl's perspective, which wonderful,
Yes.
because I think that's those kind of shows are needed. Not saying that stuff like the girl-oriented shows on like Nickelodeon aren't, but the way that Girl Meets World was presented and written and what they showed and dealt with was very much something that I don't think a lot of TV shows out there for like the preteen girls or teen girls are really aimed at. And I think it's one of those like rare gems where I wish it had gone on as long as Boy Meets World, because they had so many stories that they could have told, and the opportunities were there, and whatever the Disney's decision was on canceling it, it's just a shame, because you had these really powerful actresses playing these young characters, and just to see what they're doing now, like Rowan
Is such
Blanchard.
an activist. Oh
Oh my
gosh, she's so cool.
She is, and I love seeing that, and like reading her posts and following her, and I think that, and I really think it boils down to, it was on the Disney Channel, and if it had been on Freeform, which was ABC Family, I really think that it could have blossomed a lot better.
Yeah, it was really, really special. And in the vein of like the original Boy Meets World, it tackled some really heavy stuff too, which was so unique for its time. But to have it from that girl's perspective, I love both Rowan and Sabrina. I follow them both on social media now, and it's so cool they were, even off screen, something that I think young girls need.
Hmm.
And it's, man, but the show was also, I loved it. I honestly don't understand why it got canceled. And I guess that's part of the heartbreak of seeing things like that evolve, having been around for the first one. I can't really think of another fandom like that.
I mean, I think they're out there. It's just, I know for me, like with Boy Meets World, it was such an emotional investment then.
Yes.
Like I was already in for Girl Meets World. And I know that there are like the fandoms out there where it's like, oh, well, we're bringing this back, but it's not the same. And I think the one that comes to mind, and I don't think it's not like a continuation so much, but the recent talk of that they want to redo Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
I've heard that
and
like 100
and
times, and I don't know if they'll pull. I'm hoping they don't.
well, Joss Whedon, it's always the same thing that's brought up. Joss Whedon does not own
Right.
Buffy the Vampire Slayer. It's owned by, I believe it's Fox or 20th Century. It's owned by somebody. He doesn't own the rights, and that's the big thing is the backlash is so great from the people that did watch Buffy or got into Buffy, and they're like, no, we don't want it unless it has Joss Whedon attached to it, and then we wouldn't want it as like a reboot. We want it like continuation
Yeah.
of some kind. But I don't think that will come to fruition. But I can see other shows maybe back from like the 90s or early 2000s where they do try and do like, oh well, we're picking this up like 5 years later and going from there.
Man, I just can't imagine any world in which that would be good. Because I don't think that I think Joss has said that he wouldn't be involved with it. He just kind of shrugs his shoulders when he's asked about it. He's,
Hmm.
I don't own it, so they can do whatever they want. I just don't touch the Buffy. Just leave it like it is. It has aged super campily, but that's okay. Oh, other fandom pursuits. We've talked a lot about like visual media things we can watch, and that's definitely my biggest category. But I know you have pursuits in other categories. Tell me about those.
Well, as I said in the introduction, this month that's happening in June is dedicated to women in tabletop role playing, and that is probably, I would say, if I could, I would be role playing as much as possible. I love to role play. I love to sit around the table, and I love to have my dice and my paper with my character sheet and pencil, and have these characters where it's me and some friends, and we get to do whatever we're doing, whatever kind of game that we're doing, and seeing what we can get into. And I've loved tabletop gaming from 99 is when I got into it, like really actually started playing. I probably had some of the books as early as like 1994, 95, but I love tabletop role playing, whether it's like Dungeons and Dragons or games that don't really exist right now, like Vampire the Masquerade. Star Wars is always a fun one. And now we're in this time period, as I've talked to other people, we're in this like really good time period of role playing is popular, and it's not just popular amongst like the nerd or geek subculture that is existing. You have these online shows like Critical Role that are bringing in actors and actresses and voice actors to sit down and play hours of Dungeons and Dragons for people, and that is really amazing. Like we're in this really good frame of inclusion and bringing more people into tabletop gaming, and that's something that I'm really enjoying getting to watch and see as it's developed. So that's probably my biggest one, that if I had more time I'd be doing it. It's why on Friday nights once a month I record another whole entire podcast for us, just like me and a few friends playing a role-playing game and doing that whole podcast, which is way harder than I ever thought that was going to be. But like it's more so because I have the 3 kids. I work as a contract worker, so whatever, if I'm not working, I'm not getting paid. And so balancing my work schedule with what the kids need to do leaves very little time for me to actually get out of the house unless it's a family activity. So right now it's where I can either run the game that I do, which I do it once a month, or I'll watch like on Twitch and I'll watch other people play their games, or I'll listen to like actual play podcasts of other groups playing. And that's really one of like my big fandoms that I love is tabletop gaming.
That's so cool. I've sat in for a few like D&D campaigns, but I've never really gotten into it. I don't have a group here. Most of my friends are comics based, like paper comics.
Hmm.
Let's see. Hawkeye Hawkeye and Captain America are probably my biggest comic collections. Do you read paper comics?
I used to, again, disposable income in college led to me having many, 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 many comics. They sit in the garage untouched and unread for years. I still go to the comic store, and there is like 1 or 2 comics I'll pick up once a month, but it's not as big as it used to be. It's very expensive for, a 24-page comic is, I think, about almost $5 now. So if I do buy something, it's the trade paperback where I'll wait for it to come out. And I also have a hard time like reading comics on the digital format, which would be super cheap, but I just can't. So I'll follow along with like the storylines through like websites like, oh, this is what's happened, or this is what's going on. Like I know Kitty Pryde is getting married, and I'll probably go pick up that comic. But it's not where I'm picking up comics every week. I don't have a subscription box. It's nothing like it used to be. And that's okay. Like I love people that love comics, and I love the artists, and I love people that do fan art of comic characters, and people that cosplay as comic book characters. And it is one of those things where it's not as prevalent as it used to be.
Yeah, I definitely had my heyday, and now we kind of pick up, like I don't buy individuals anymore. I think the last ones we bought were the Hawkeye run, Aha, and who wrote that? Oh, now I don't remember, but it was so good. And we could not wait for the trade paperbacks, but mostly that's what we do.
Yeah.
And it's the smaller runs now. I mean, I used to be into the big characters, and we'd have a subscription, a pull list, and they would just be waiting for us when we got there. But now it's things like Bitch Planet, Pretty Deadly. My husband reads a lot of like Matt Fraction's works.
Mm-hmm.
We have our little like fringe comics now. It's very cool how comics have moved into like social commentary, like bordering on social commentary. I really like the smart comics now. So I feel like my taste has evolved.
Yeah, that it's very similar. Like I go towards the trade paperbacks to begin with, but again, it's expensive, and then after I'm done with it, I'm not sure if I want to keep it or figure out something to do with it. So like I have trades that are sitting around, but since we're getting ready to pack up and everything, it's like, I'm not buying anything right now. I don't really need it. And there's nothing pressing where it's to the point of I must have this, give it to me now.
Yeah, a few years back, even as recent as that, there were, but right now we're kind of in the same boat. But I do love the media of comics. And it's so cool that you're doing the women in tabletop gaming at the moment. I was thinking about how let's see, I guess, was it 2014, 2015 Gamergate happened? And it's kind of like a drastic swing back from that. And it's so cool to see creators and people like you putting women in that spotlight when so many people were trying to take that away.
Yeah, it's definitely something where, and I think it's a shift, especially in tabletop gaming in recent years, especially like the latest edition, fifth edition, is more geared towards like storytelling instead of, oh, you're rolling and I'm going to go kill the thing. Like it's more, it seems that it's developed more to everyone doing a collaborative story. If you succeed, you succeed. If you fail, you fail, but the story continues and you figure out how that failure will affect the story. And it feels like with between like the push for diversity on some of the bigger companies like Wizards of the Coast, who does Dungeons and Dragons, like their push for diversity, their push to not like, and I'm not saying in a negative way, they're bringing in the best people who, regardless of if they're black, white, woman, man, alien, anything. And their hiring choices and their social media and everything that they do with like their partnered streams, like a lot of them either have like women running the game, or half the group is women, or the whole group is women. And that's a big thing like on the podcast side, is you'll find all women D&D podcasts, or an all like not like LGBTQ plus like non like binary or non-binary, like you'll get these very super inclusive podcasts. And that, I think, like that kind of stuff is hopefully leading the way towards a better sense of inclusion and acceptance, and getting it to be like, oh look, there's like the one random woman at a comic shop, to it's just the norm. Like it needs to be just the norm, like men, women playing D&D, buying comics, being interested. Like don't be, I know one of the things is always like, oh, are you buying that for your boyfriend?
Yeah.
Well, and that's the line for probably like the past 10 or 15 years. And I'm glad that line is finally changing, and that specific like fandom culture is moving away from that to what it is now.
I really hope it continues in that direction. I've been there. I haven't been there as much. I have a friend who like worked in a Hollywood comic store, and so I would hear her horror stories having worked there, and it was just like, oh man, I don't even get a fraction of that just buying them. So I know it still exists, but it's really cool to see movements branching away from that. And I think that's another benefit of kind of seeing the evolution of geekdom. It is kind of hopeful, I think.
It is, as long as like everyone understands, like, you know what, at the end of the day, especially like on some of the ones that are very divisive right now, and I'll just pull out the most recent one is like Star Wars. I'm a Star Wars fan. You over there, you're a Star Wars fan. We might not agree on the what parts of each movie was great or not great, but at the end of the day, we're both Star Wars fans. We got to treat each other nicely. We don't have to be the way that it's gotten recently with like such negativity, and not only to like the fans, but like to the creators or to the actors and
I was
actresses.
just thinking that. Yeah.
Like it's so, we live in this time where it's everything and everybody is super accessible, but that doesn't mean that you have to treat the people that you're now accessible to like garbage.
Yeah, like an actual commodity.
Right. You are entitled to your opinions, and if you want to put those opinions out there, do it on a blog or a YouTube channel or something that's yours, but you do not need to be going after like and targeting those people and telling them like that they're ruining the franchise or they're what, like.
Are you thinking of the same person I'm thinking of? I'm thinking of Rose from Star Wars, Rose Tico.
Oh no, I was initially I was thinking of the director.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I did not realize he got a ton of heat. But I
never have I ever seen people come after somebody and say that singular person is the ruination of the entire Star Wars franchise.
Wow. Yeah, I've heard the same thing about her. People who, because I guess now we have the same, really, when you boil it down, the same love triangle that existed in the original films, without, I guess, that we know of, the inclusion of a brother. But all of a sudden, because it's between characters of color, all of a sudden it's just not Star Wars anymore. And it's, man, there was like a tide, I think, when she was announced, of just backlash that I heard. And it was, I mean, what you're saying, it's really an allegory for humanity. I mean, you're a Star Wars fan, I'm a Star Wars fan, you're a human, I'm a human, she's a human. We should all be treated like humans.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
people forget that in fandom, I think.
They do. It's, even when you have your real name out there, like I manage a Facebook group for the neighborhood, and this neighborhood has like 3,000 or 4,000 houses or whatever. And the way that people talk to each other on that Facebook group, I have said many times, would you really say that to that person's face at our Publix, at the bank? Would you really be that rude to somebody to their face? Like, it just blows me away.
Yeah, it really, really does. And I don't know, maybe there will be a movement that will bring people back to remembering that, characters are not characters. They're not, I mean, yes, they're accessible, but they're not commodities. That would be really cool. Maybe we'll see that happen. We'll see. I mean, I think social media is a really cool thing, and it makes fandom super inclusive. Like, there's no longer like any niche characters. Like, even if they just showed up for a minute, you can find who played that person, who voiced that person, who designed that person. And a lot of times you can actually have an interaction with them.
Mm-hmm.
And that is so, so cool. And I think people just need to like relax and remember how cool that is and just take it with them. Man. Anyway, off my soapbox. What made you want to pursue this podcast?
Oh my goodness. I've probably said it a few times throughout like the podcasts that I've recorded. The kids were getting to the point where it's like, okay, they're on a schedule, they're in school, they're doing their thing. And I really wanted to do something for me because, again, I wasn't going to tabletop gaming, which was my previous thing, like before the kids, and even when the kids were like babies, was I could always still go and play Dungeons and Dragons or do a tabletop game. And with them, it's not really possible between the work schedule that I have and all their activities. But I remember talking to somebody that had already done a podcast and they really enjoyed it. And I was like, that would be something really neat to do a podcast. Now, mind you, I had no idea what I needed to do, but Black Friday rolled around and Amazon, as they usually do, ran like great deals throughout like the entire weekend. And one of them was on a microphone.
Yay! What microphone do you use?
Currently, and I still use it to this day, which I need to eventually switch to the new one that I bought, but I use a Blue Yeti.
That's what I'm using. I was just about to suggest that. I love that for USB microphones.
Yes, so I use the Blue Yeti. I know that in the podcasting realm, it's not the greatest thing. It picks up a lot of noise that you might hear throughout podcasts or whatever, but it was on like super sale because they normally go for like over $100. It's like $69 or $70. Picked it up, ordered it, got it within 2 days, and it sat on my desk for at least 3 months. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do a podcast. What am I going to do it about? I'm boring. I'm not going to talk for like 30 minutes or an hour, because I'll never keep my thoughts straight, and then it'd turn into be something scripted, and I'm not going to do that either. And I was bouncing ideas back and forth with one of my closest friends, Jaquel, who's been on the podcast before many times. And finally, I settled on an idea of, well, it's really hard for me to get out and meet people, regardless of whatever like fandom issue it is, or going to conventions, or even just meeting people. It's very hard to do that as not only a married couple, but married with 3 kids, and they all have things to do. Like it's just extremely hard to get those kinds of relationships at this point. And that's when I knew I wanted to have people come on and I would talk to them about fandom, because everybody has something that they like. So, and it's one of those things where maybe one episode's not going to be for everybody, but the next one will be. Or that episode will bring in people that haven't heard the podcast, and they'll check out that episode and maybe stick around. That was the main motivation, was for me to be able to grow and make friends, really. And I feel like, if nothing else, for the investment of time that I put into the podcast, for the investment of money that I put into the podcast, because I don't make anything on the podcast. I pay for the site, I pay for the hosting. Obviously, like, my time is dedicated to recording episodes and editing, and so I do that when I can. But what I've gotten out of it has been incredibly wonderful relationships with many people. Now, do I talk to everybody after a podcast episode is over? No. And that's, I think sometimes it's just the way of, everyone has busy schedules and lives too. But my Facebook friend list went from under 100, because I always used to be like, no, I'm not going to have more friends than 100, because then I start losing that actual connection. With the podcast, I've added so many people I've recorded with and have grown close to, and have like these close ties of friendship. And I know people are like, oh, you talk to them on the internet, you talk to them once, whatever. But I really feel like there have been these people that I've connected with on the podcast, and I've had these incredible relationships, getting to talk with them for an hour, like just an hour, to make friends on Facebook and continue that relationship and grow it in such a way where I'm like, I cannot believe how lucky I am to not only have people like sacrifice their time initially, especially on the initial like lead up to even having a podcast, to like asking people, hey, I'm starting a podcast, would you like to be on it? But to have like those relationships develop into something that have been around for as long as I've been doing the podcast now. That is the best thing that has come out of this podcast.
Yeah, that would do it for me. I mean, I know our initial connection was really random. I think you found me on a cosplay website.
I did. I think I found you on, I think it's like geekxgirls.com.
That sounds right.
And it was your Xena costume. Maybe it was Xena. I'm not sure. But it was definitely, I think, on that site where I was like, oh, hey, look at that. Because and people like to ask, like, oh, how did I find my initial guest? Besides like asking friends, like, hey, friend, would you like to be on my podcast? Was, how am I going to find people that want to talk about fandoms? The people that are going to sacrifice their time and money making a costume to wear, means hopefully that they like those characters, right, and that fandom. So that was like the initial entry point, and that was a whole nother thing of like learning new social media there.
I think cosplayers by nature are absolutely fanatical, because truly you do have to be nuts to do something like that. Xena armor almost did drive me just absolutely batty. I'm not an armor person, so maybe that was part of it. But yeah, it's really a labor of love, like I'm sure the podcast is.
Oh yeah, it's much less intensive, I think, because I'm not measuring, I'm not sewing, I'm not. If I make a mistake, I have an edit button that I can go back and try and fix it again.
I want one of those.
Yeah, if there's an edit button in cosplay, I think life would be a lot easier for some.
I do love it, but oh my God, the frustration that comes from cosplay sometimes. You just have to walk away.
Yeah, it's I don't know how some people can do it, because it's something where I don't like, just I can't imagine like working on something for so long and then realizing, well, that didn't work and now I've got to start all
Yeah.
over.
Yeah. I mean, some days it's really like, no, that's the end of it. I'm done. And you just walk away. And then the next day you come back to it and you're like, okay, I think I know how to fix this. It's going to take 100 hours, but I think I know how to fix this. It's nuts. But as to meeting people online, like I do know that some people discount that. I mean, I've heard that from especially older people, but I've done it so many times in my life. I have two friends who live in Hollywood who I met on Tumblr of all places, through the Marvel fandom. And actually, the second one, I've known them for 5 years now. And finally, the second one is coming out here for C2E2 next weekend. So I finally get to meet her after 5 years. I'm so excited. It's so cool when it works out.
It is. I know that when Star Wars Celebration was last year, I got to meet one of my guests, and I was like, "Oh, that's so awesome!" That like, I've talked to you, and we've talked over like Facebook, and she's on my friends list. I'm like, it's so cool to actually meet her in person and talk to her. And again, in person, I don't want to call it like social anxiety because I'm not like diagnosed with it, but I do not handle big crowds. I don't like meeting people. It's very hard. I like to like stay in my little area of the world and let life happen around me if I need to.
My husband is like that. He always says he's really glad I talk so much.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And it was incredible to meet people, and I'd love to like eventually, hopefully, maybe I'll get to meet more people. But I have this incredible friendship of people that I've done through the podcast, and I don't know what my life would have been like without doing it, but I'm so grateful that I did do it.
That's so cool. I know that I do not have the focus or the target audience to start a podcast, but it makes me want to. It's such a cool thing. But yeah, I know better. I don't even know how I get through an entire costume. I have focus problems. So that's probably, I have a question here that says, what's the best thing you've gotten out of the experience so far? And it sounds like it's the people.
Yes, definitely the people.
That's so cool that you can go from a posting on a cosplay site specifically with me to, 3 years, 2 years down the road, wherever we are. However, this is episode 3 and you are on my friends list. So you get to kind of see like what I'm doing right now. It's all house stuff. So it's pretty boring. But like the real life side of fandom is so cool, I think.
Right. And we both know secrets about each other too.
Right,
so.
Exactly. And it's a secret that not a lot of people know, especially in my cosplay community. So that's okay.
That's right.
Let's see. I have a question about what's coming soon. And I know so many of it, like of the things that you have planned, but I want you to tell the people.
Well, obviously, as this episode comes out on June 6th, we'll be 6 days into the Women in Tabletop Gaming Month, which is as we record this, I can only say so much, but 30 at least as of recording now, I have 30 episodes.
Oh my gosh.
Every day for June will be a episode with a woman who is into tabletop gaming, whether they are just a player, just somebody that runs it, whether they have a podcast, a blog, a YouTube, a Twitch channel, they're in the business as like a small business owner. It grew from a tweet that I had sent out after recording, and I'd recorded with 3 or 4 women that played tabletop gaming, and I sent out a tweet and I was like, there should be a Women in Tabletop Gaming Month. Does anybody know if there is one? And the response that I got back from a few people was no, but you should do it. And I said, okay, you know what? I'm going to do a Women in Tabletop Gaming Month. My original plan was 4 episodes, 1 every week, because that's my release schedule. And then I said, you know what? I've recorded with a lot of women that have played tabletop gaming. I could at least repurpose some of those episodes and re-release them, just as, extra episodes. And I said, well, if I'm going to do that, like I'm halfway to a whole month, I can add more people and record with enough people to make it 30. So as of today, we're recording this on March 28th. I've got my 30 episodes between old content and new recordings, and I have probably another 5 or 6 people scheduled at this point to record with. So I'll have more than 30 episodes for the month of June. We have a website, womenintabletopgaming.com, where not only am I doing stuff, but I'm reaching out to podcasts and bloggers and YouTubers and streamers and role-playing companies and small business companies that are in the role-playing business and trying to have them partner with me so that way they're releasing some kind of content during the month of June. So that way they'll have promotion for the month, and companies are going to be giving discounts during the month. Companies are going to be doing giveaways for the month, which I can't say what they are right now because that's still in the works. But it's awesome that people are joining in and saying, you know what, we're going to make this a whole thing, a whole big thing. So hopefully this first year of doing it goes well enough that it makes like a big tide of people wanting to continue to do it. And I was lucky enough, like I have an artist friend who donated her time to make a logo. And I said, well, we'll put the logo on stuff and then I'll just donate the money to a women's charity. So we're going to donate all the proceeds of whatever sales happen for these designs to a women's charity, because why not? I mean, that's my thought process is I'm not going to keep the money. Like, I'm doing this because I volunteered to do it. I'll pay for the website and I'm already paying for the hosting. So why not do it? So that's the big thing for this podcast. I think this year is the Women in Tabletop Gaming Month. And then I've missed some anniversary episodes, which killed me. Like I missed the Deep Space Nine anniversary in January, but it just didn't work out. I missed the Power Rangers anniversary, but there's 2 episodes I'm hoping to do at the end of the year. One is Battlestar Galactica's 15th anniversary, and then Leverage is having its 10-year anniversary, and I'd like to do that, but that's going to be based on just getting guests to come back and talk about it for, an hour or so about those specific things, which can be done. And I like to get I love doing special episodes that focus on one fandom. But yeah, and then I've got enough recorded material as we record that I'll have episodes at least into August. And
oh my gosh.
I'll have more episodes. Probably I'll start another series of recordings in July to get me through the rest of the year.
That is incredible. I cannot believe there's so much like material to carry you so far at the moment. This is why I don't run a podcast.
Well, the secret for my thing is I will bulk record. So I will pick a month. Like I think it was end of January and February. I did probably 30 recordings, and that was like right before I started Women Tabletop Gaming Month stuff. So it's gone a little bit crazy beyond that. But I try to do all my recordings in 1 month, and then I space them out once a week, and it gets me through 3 to 4 months usually, and then I do another batch of recordings. So that way I'm trying not to record every day or every week. I'd like to have the time to like watch my TV shows and edit and promote and do whatever else I need to do.
That's so cool. Anyway, those are the ends of my questions. Do you have anything else you want to announce? I want to make sure you get to plug all the cool things that you've got coming up.
I think that's it. But I mean, if you have any other questions that have popped up into your head, I will certainly answer them.
I think we covered them. I love talking about like the niche fan, especially like Boy Meets Girl. That's my favorite that I think I don't get to talk about with so many people, and it's so cool that you watched the new one.
Let me tell you, and this is not a secret to the people that know me, like one of my favorite like I always have like like not celebrity crushes, but like character crushes. Like Jurassic Park, I really love Lex, and that was like the time period that Boy Meets World was coming out, and was that time frame. I fell in love with Topanga.
You and me both.
I loved Topanga. If I was like, and that was during my high school years, and I was like, man, I really wish I could find a girl that was like Topanga. And didn't find anybody that was like Topanga, because Topanga is such a unique character. But I love Topanga. I love Danielle Fishel, although like she's totally into some music choices that I'm not a big fan of. I'm not like a rapper and that type of
Yeah,
music.
it's so surprising.
It
She
is,
just got
and
engaged.
seeing,
I was just on her Instagram.
yeah, I think, and she like back in the MTV heyday of like Spring Break and stuff, she used to do like celebrity rap
Oh
competitions,
my
which
gosh.
it blows
I'm
me
gonna have to
away.
YouTube that.
But yeah, like I loved her, and then I tried to have my daughter's name be Topanga, and that was easily vetoed. Like
That's an
absolutely
awesome
not.
name.
So yeah, like that was back in the day, and man, so many tears on that show, whether it was like A Long Walk to Pittsburgh where Topanga moves
Oh my
away,
gosh, and then she comes back in the rain.
she comes back in the rain and she's soaked, or
And it was so cool because her aunt was Juliet from like way back in the day. My puppy is having a puppy dream, and I'm sure you can hear it. And that like, oh, it was so cool to just have like that Shakespeare fandom pop up and be like, surprise!
oh my
I
gosh,
loved
yeah. And then like the episode where like the big episode of Corey and Topanga break up, and
Oh.
you deal with that for like almost, I don't remember how many episodes that was,
It
but
was
it
a
felt
long
like
time.
forever.
Yeah. She made him work for it.
Oh yeah, and then like even she like had that episode where she's like, I realized what you mean, and now they're getting back together, and yeah, like that, that was such a good series, and I love it so much.
So good. I was obsessed with her hair, and it took me, I don't know, I was probably like 28 before I got to the point of like true Topanga hair, and it was so much work.
Oh my gosh, yeah, and then like she cuts it off in that one episode. It's like, what did you
Yeah.
do?
I do have to say that finally getting a haircut was incredible. Oh my gosh. I mean, I know that's kind of like Danielle Fishel's thing. Like her hair is so incredible, but man, cutting it off made it so easy.
Yeah, I cannot imagine that. My daughter has long hair. It's very long. It's very curly. So when it's washed, it's so long, and then when it dries, it just goes back, and it's like, I don't understand.
It's a process. I cut mine for my Beverly Crusher uniform, so it was like long enough to tuck into my waistband before that, and then I chopped off I think like 14 inches, and all of a sudden it was like, oh my God, this is so easy to deal with. It was incredible, incredible.
Now, are you handing me back the show?
I am.
Are we
You can have your creation back. Hopefully, I did it justice.
now for those people who have listened and they like you more than me? Then too bad, because now I have the show back. But for those people who are interested in finding you on social media, where are some of the best places that they can do that?
I am Asgard Barbie basically everywhere. Instagram is one of my favorites, but I think I'm more active on Facebook these days. I'm a little quiet while we just bought a house this summer, and you know that I'm renovating, and it is soul sucking. It's a lot of fun, and I get to surprisingly use my cosplay skills a lot, putting features into the house. Thank God I have a theater degree. That's helped. A lot of people are like, what are you going to do with that? Well, I'm going to renovate a house. That's my new answer to that question. But I will be back this August with a new cosplay, not actually for me. I will say that my husband will be wearing it, but I am so massively excited for that cosplay. Oh my God. And then next year I have a full slate, just like I have been. I just had to take this year off for dealing with the house.
Now, there's something else that you are doing, and I want to bring it up because I feel like I want you to promote it. It's a good
Oh,
thing.
I know what you're talking about now. I was like, no, I'm not.
Yes,
I'm really, but I am. Um,
you are.
this past summer was one of those like, well, we have a house. We've checked off, the boxes, like the adulting boxes, and we're finally getting down the list. Like, what am I going to do with my life? And the answer was obviously dogs. People who know me know that my dogs are my world. Like, I am a crazy dog mom. If they need it, they have it. If they don't need it, they still have it. I I just love them. And here in Chicago, we have just an insane population of dogs that need homes, dogs that need medical help, dogs that are terminal, waiting in shelters, things like that. So I sucked it up and I started my own dog rescue. My husband and I run a rescue that hopes to pull animals from animal care and control, which is a kill shelter. We are not a no-kill city yet. I have big hopes that we will be in the future. But for now, we do have kill shelters that run incredible populations. And most of the year, they're overbooked, honestly. They've got more numbers than they can deal with. So what we hope to do is pull from those shelters, vet those dogs, get those dogs the socialization that they need. And then when people come to meet them, they don't see a project. They see, oh, this is this dog's personality, and this dog would work great in, the larger spectrum of my home. And I really think that that kind of care is what's going to get dogs adopted. And I have the time and I have the heart for it. So why not?
Now, does your rescue, can people find that on the
Yes, we do
internet?
have a website. We are at bideawedoghaven.com. I will write that out for you. Bideawe is Scottish colloquial. It just means stay a while. And that's kind of what I want these dogs to do. I want them to stay and blossom a little bit and learn that baths are not a bad thing and that people can be trusted, and then go on to their forever homes. We actually have an adoption in 2 weeks that's happening, and I'm so excited for it. I actually know the people who are adopting this dog, and so I know what kind of life she's going to have, and it is awesome to see where she was versus where she's going to end up.
That is awesome. That's one of those things where I know that I could never do something like that, but the people, it's so amazing. Number one, to be able to like go in and essentially rescue these dogs and make sure that they're taken care of and get them to where they need to be. I would get so emotionally attached to each one. I'd be like, no, I must have like all 500 dogs.
Oh, I do. I get hugely emotionally attached. But what we've kind of agreed on is we have a few breeds that are exceptions, because in our lifetime, we've just taken what needs us. We don't really get to choose the breeds, but we do have our favorites. So we're always like, well, if one of those comes along, we're going to take it. But mostly my husband and I do senior and special needs dogs. That's what we adopt. And we have agreed to pull those types of dogs and keep them if they would do better in our home, because it's pretty rare to find somebody who's home all day, and I can do that. And sometimes these dogs, like my oldest, has seizures, and it's really nice to have somebody there with her. Some dogs need medicine, diabetics. They need insulin twice a day, and some people just can't be home for that. So we've committed to kind of stocking our house with those quirky little animals. And it's so nice. I have 5 permanent residents right now, which is low for us. We're looking at maybe adding another one. We'll see. They just kind of come along when they come along. It's not usually planned.
That is awesome. And hopefully things can change in your city so that way it works out better.
There are bigger organizations than us that are working toward it, organizations who have way more funding, way more like organizations who've been around for like 30 years. And there are people who lobby here, and it's been done in other cities. So I do think we're definitely on our way. We're very dog friendly as far as our like legislative bodies. The people in charge at the moment are really dog friendly. So I think it'll happen. Crossing my fingers.
Well, I hope it does, but you are doing awesome work to do that and take that on. And I can only say good things about that.
Well, I can only say good things until they bark in the middle of my episode. They lay on all my cosplay. It is, and logistically, it's a nightmare. But it's a really cute nightmare, so it's okay.
Well, let's see here. You don't have anything else.
No, I'm good.
I don't have anything else. So
I think we can wrap this episode.
So thank you, Barbie, for coming back on and taking over the podcast and being part of this second anniversary.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so cool. I definitely do not want to run a podcast after this, but I definitely want to think that I could. It's okay to be wrong. So I'm glad you're doing it. You keep doing what you're doing.
I will certainly keep it up as long as I can.
Thank you for listening to Tales from the Fandom. Subscribe to us on iTunes or your podcast app of choice. Follow us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/Tales from the Fandom to see photos, links, leave feedback, and check out upcoming guests. If you'd like to be a guest, email David at talesfromthefandom@gmail.com.